While I was deployed, my dad's new girlfriend threw my 10-year-old brother out of the house, so when I got back, I made sure she faced the consequences. Sometimes life throws you a curveball so hard it knocks the wind right out of you. But what do you do when that curveball isn't just aimed at you, but at the little brother you swore to protect? What happens when you come home from serving your country, only to find out your 10-year-old sibling has been thrown out of his own house by the woman your dad chose over him? Let me tell you, that kind of betrayal ignites a fire you didn't know you had. The low hum of fluorescent lights in the barracks office cut through the pre-dawn silence, casting long, stark shadows. Outside, a biting German wind whistled, but the chill in my bones had nothing to do with the weather. My phone lay heavy in my hand, still warm from the frantic call, and the world I thought I knew had just shattered. This story, it starts a few years back, 2 years after we lost my mom to pancreatic cancer. It was fast, brutal. A diagnosis in March, gone by July. Like a phantom limb, the pain was always there. She left behind me Ethan, 25 at the time, my little brother Caleb, who was just 8, and our dad, David. Mom, she was the anchor. The gentle hand that guided Caleb through his homework, the quiet reminder that Dad needed to pay the bills. When she left us, our entire world just imploded. Dad became a ghost for about 8 months. A shell of a man. He couldn't cook a decent meal, the house slowly fell into disarray, and getting Caleb to school on time became a daily struggle. I was home for the funeral, stayed an extra month, trying desperately to piece back what was broken. But the army doesn't wait for your grief to heal. I had to go back overseas. Before I left, I set up grocery deliveries, hired a cleaning service, and practically begged our neighbor, Mrs. Albright, to keep an eye on Caleb. She'd known us for 15 years, loved Caleb like her own grandson. Then, about 10 months after Mom passed, Dad met Tiffany. He found her at some grief support group, which, looking back, is just drenched in a sick kind of irony. She was 42, twice divorced, always impeccably put together. Perfect makeup, designer bags that screamed expensive but somehow clashed with her dental hygienist income. Her nails were always perfect, hair always styled. The kind of woman who looked ready for a photo shoot while buying milk. She'd hang on Dad's every word, laughing like he was the funniest man alive, always touching his arm, a performative intimacy that felt off. What truly unsettled me was how fast she moved in. 2 months, a bathroom drawer. 3 months, her own key. For months, she was redecorating, throwing out Mom's favorite reading chair because it didn't match, telling Dad his clothes were dated. And Dad? He just ate it up. After a year of barely functioning, someone paying him that kind of attention again, it was everything he thought he needed. He couldn't see what was so glaringly obvious to everyone else. I came home on leave 4 months into their whirlwind romance, and immediately, something felt wrong. The house smelled different. Mom's pictures, once vibrant and ever-present, were suddenly tucked away in less prominent spots. Tiffany had rearranged everything, imposing her sterile taste on our lived-in home. Caleb was quieter, too. When I asked about Tiffany, he just shrugged, a small, defeated movement. "She's whatever," he mumbled, his eyes fixed on the floor. But the way he said it, that hollow tone, I knew. Kids are terrible at hiding discomfort. They just shut down. I tried talking to Dad. Told him things were moving too fast, that Tiffany seemed too eager to erase Mom's presence, that Caleb was off. Dad shut me down. "You're being paranoid," he said, his voice clipped. "You're just not ready to see me move on. Tiffany's wonderful, Ethan. Give her a chance." So I swallowed my concerns. Maybe grief was making me suspicious. I went back overseas, trying to trust Dad knew what he was doing. That was my first mistake. A colossal, unforgivable mistake. Over the next few months, Mrs. Albright's texts started coming. Nothing concrete, just observations. Caleb was spending more time at her house. Tiffany didn't seem warm to him. She'd heard raised voices through the walls, snippets of arguments. I called Caleb every week, but he never said anything was wrong. Just school, video games, books. Normal kid stuff. But there was always a tremor beneath his voice, a hint of something unsaid. Then, in late July, I deployed to Germany for 6 months. Standard logistics, nothing dangerous, but it put me 8 hours ahead. Checking in became harder, the time difference a silent barrier. I told Caleb to call me anytime, day or night. Told Mrs. Albright to alert me immediately if anything at all, felt off. 3 months into that deployment, at 2 in the morning my phone rang. It was Mrs. Albright, her voice shaking, barely coherent through her sobs. Caleb was at her house. She'd found him sitting on her porch in the dark, a garbage bag full of clothes beside him, crying. Tiffany had told him to leave, to find somewhere else to live. And his father hadn't stopped her. My 10-year-old brother, kicked out of his own home, in November, in the dark. The words clawed at my throat. I spent the next hour on the phone, piecing together the horror. Tiffany had decided Caleb was too much trouble, too messy, too loud, an inconvenient obstacle to her new life. She'd been pushing Dad for months to send him to boarding school, to live with relatives. Dad kept saying no, but his resistance was crumbling. Every week he gave a little more ground. Every week, Tiffany pushed harder, her resolve like acid on his already weakened will. That night, it had been a minor fight. Caleb left his backpack in the living room. Tiffany tripped. Something in her just snapped. She started screaming that he was ruining everything, that he didn't belong there, that he needed to go find his real family. And Dad sat right there. Didn't say a word. Caleb, terrified, asked his father if he didn't want him anymore. Dad just looked at the floor. Silent. Tiffany grabbed a trash bag, told Caleb to pack, said he had 20 minutes or she'd call the police and say he was a runaway. Dad watched. He watched his son pack his meager life into a trash bag. Watched him walk out that front door into the cold November night. And he never said a single word to stop it. Mrs. Albright had been watching from her window. Saw Caleb. Saw the bag. He just sat on her porch, a small, desolate figure, staring into nothingness. She found him, crying, brought him inside. I sat in my barracks room, staring at the sterile white wall. Rage, pure and burning, threatened to consume me. It pulsed in my temples, blurred my vision. But rage makes you stupid. So I pushed it down, deep down. And I started making plans. Because Tiffany and my father, they seemed to forget one crucial detail. That house didn't belong to my dad. It belonged to my mother. And when she died, she left it to me and Caleb through a trust. I was the trustee until Caleb turned 18. Dad wasn't on the deed. He was living there because we let him, not because he owned anything. Tiffany had just thrown the legal owner of that house out into the street. And I was going to make sure she understood exactly what that meant. Getting emergency leave approved took 11 agonizing days. Every second felt like an eternity. Paperwork, calls, explaining my family drama to commanders who had bigger things to worry about than a domestic dispute. But Mrs. Albright's son, Ben, a local lawyer, faxed over documentation proving a minor property owner had been illegally evicted. That sped things up. During those 11 days, Caleb stayed with the Albrights. Ben advised me not to tip off Dad or Tiffany. We needed everything lined up, airtight. So I played dumb with Dad on the phone. Kept my voice neutral, detached. Everything's fine, he said, too quickly. Caleb's staying with friends to sort out some behavioral issues. Tiffany sends her love. I wanted to scream, to unleash the torrent of fury building inside me. But I couldn't show my hand. Not yet. Ben confirmed it. The house was in my name and Caleb's. Dad had zero ownership. He was a guest. Ben also dug up some dirt on Tiffany. Hadn't worked in 3 years despite her claims. Her previous marriages ended with her walking away with houses and cash. She had a playbook. But this time, she'd miscalculated monumentally. Dad didn't own what she thought he owned. I landed on a Tuesday afternoon, rented a car, and drove straight to Ben's office. He had a folder waiting for me. The deed, Mrs. Albright's detailed account, information about filing a CPS complaint. Our strategy was simple. Get Tiffany out tonight, then deal with the rest legally. If she refused, we'd get the sheriff. I'd file eviction paperwork for Dad, a 30-day process. And I'd file the CPS report for child abandonment. I chose all of it. Every single devastating option. Ben made calls. Then I drove home. It was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Lights on. Tiffany's white SUV in Mom's old spot. Dad's truck next to it. I sat there for a minute, just looking at the house where I'd grown up, feeling a cold knot in my stomach. Then I got out. Didn't knock. I had a key. They were in the living room, watching TV, a sitcom blaring. The room, it was unrecognizable. New paint, new furniture, new decorations. Like they'd surgically removed every trace of our family, of Mom, of Caleb. Tiffany looked up first. Her face cycled through surprise, confusion, then a forced, brittle smile. Ethan, what a surprise. You didn't tell us you were coming home. I didn't answer her. My eyes locked onto my father. His expression was a mixture of shock and unease. My voice was low, dangerous. Where's Caleb? Dad shifted in his recliner, avoiding my gaze. He's staying with friends. We thought some space would be good for him. I know exactly where Caleb is, I said, my voice barely a whisper, but it cut through the room. I know what happened. I know everything. The room went silent. The sitcom laughter seemed grotesque. Tiffany, ever the actress, tried to take control. She stood up, started calmly explaining there'd been a misunderstanding, Caleb acting out, needing structure, long-term solutions, blah, blah, blah. I cut her off. You have 30 minutes to pack whatever is actually yours and get out of my house. If you're not gone by then, I'll have you removed for trespassing. She laughed. An actual, incredulous laugh. What are you talking about? This is David's house. You can't just kick me out. I pulled the deed from my folder. Held it up. It felt like a weapon. This house belongs to me and my 10-year-old brother. Mom left it to us. Dad lives here because we let him. You live here because Dad let you. I pointed to the document, my finger trembling slightly. Look closely. My father's name isn't on it. Dad finally spoke, his voice tight, his face pale. Your mom wanted me to have the house. There's gotta be some mistake. Did you ever actually read Mom's will, Dad? I asked, my voice cutting him to the bone. Or did you just assume everything would work out in your favor? He had no answer. Just a blank, stunned look. Tiffany's face transformed. That polished mask cracked, revealing raw anger mixed with disbelief. She looked at Dad, a venomous glare, the dawning realization that she'd bet on the wrong horse, that Dad had nothing worth taking. She turned back to me, changing tactics, trying to salvage something. Ethan, I understand you're upset. We can talk about this like adults. No need to be hasty. 28 minutes now. Dad stood, his face red with indignation. I'm not letting you throw my girlfriend out of my home. I'm still your father. You need to show some respect. Respect. I shot back, every ounce of buried pain and anger rising to the surface. What respect did you show Caleb? What kind of father watches his girlfriend throw his 10-year-old son out into the cold and then lies about it? You think Mom would be proud of who you've become? That landed. I watched it hit him hard. His mouth opened, closed. No words came out. Tiffany grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with panic. Don't let him get in your head, David. He's just trying to cause problems because he never accepted us. 25 minutes, I stated, cold as ice. Every minute you argue is a minute less for packing. She finally got it, the absolute finality of my words. She stormed off towards the bedroom, the sounds of slamming drawers and closet doors echoing through the house. Dad just stood there, lost, like he couldn't process any of it. The eviction paperwork, I told him, my voice devoid of emotion, gets filed tomorrow morning. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. Are you serious? You're going to kick your own father out? You kicked yourself out the moment you chose her over Caleb. Tiffany left in 23 minutes, dragging 2 suitcases and a trash bag. No goodbye, just a look of pure hatred as she peeled out of the driveway, leaving angry tire marks on the asphalt. Dad didn't go with her. He sank back into his recliner, staring at the blank TV screen, in shock. I had nothing else to say. The silence was deafening. That night, I walked through the house, seeing all the changes, what was missing, what had been replaced. Mom's pictures hidden in a box in the garage, wrapped in newspaper like trash. Her clothes gone. Jewelry, books. Tiffany had surgically erased her from every room. Caleb's room was the worst. His bed, posters, toys, the model rocket we built, all gone. Replaced by Tiffany's sterile desk, filing cabinet, generic art prints. A cold, empty space where a child's imagination used to live. The next morning, the first thing I did was file the eviction paperwork. Then the CPS report. A caseworker would be assigned. Ben was confident I'd get full guardianship. Mrs. Albright had documented everything, dates, times, Caleb's statements. She had a heart of gold and a mind like a steel trap. I picked Caleb up from her house that afternoon. Mrs. Albright hugged me, tears in her eyes, said she was proud. Your mother would be proud, too, she whispered. That hit me deep. A wave of sorrow and fierce determination. Caleb was quiet in the car. When we pulled into the driveway, he didn't move, just stared at the house, a stranger in his own home. Inside, he looked around with wide, confused eyes. Where's all the furniture from? Where'd my room go? Mom's pictures? I told him we'd fix it. Everything. We started in the garage, finding Mom's photo boxes. Caleb unwrapped each one carefully, reverently. He stopped on a picture of Mom holding him as a baby, just staring at it for a long, long time, his small face etched with a grief too big for his years. We spent 3 hours putting the house back together. By dinner, the living room almost looked like Mom's again, a fragile echo of the past. Where's Tiffany? He asked, his voice small.
Gone.
She's not coming back. What about Dad? He's staying somewhere else for a while. We'll figure out the details later. Caleb was quiet for a minute. Then, the question I dreaded, the one that broke my heart. Did he pick her over me? I didn't know what to say. Didn't want to lie. Didn't want to break his heart further. So I just pulled him into a fierce hug, held him tight, feeling his small frame tremble against me. Told him, whatever happens with Dad, I'm not going anywhere. This is your house, Caleb. Nobody is ever going to make you leave again. He cried for 10 minutes, his tears soaking my shirt, a 10-year-old grappling with his father's unimaginable failure. After he calmed, we ordered pizza. Small steps. Dad didn't go quietly. 3 days after I filed the eviction, he showed up with Tiffany, coached and ready for a fight. He came in hot, spewing arguments. The house was his in spirit. Mom would have wanted him to have it. I was cruel. He'd contest the will. He'd sue. Tiffany stood behind him, nodding, his personal cheerleader, egging him on. I let him finish, watched him expend all his bluster. Then I told him to leave. He refused. I called Ben, put him on speaker. Ben's words were blunt, chillingly devoid of emotion. The deed says Ethan and Caleb. Nothing to contest. Eviction is valid. If he's not out in 30 days, the sheriff removes him. And the CPS investigation is ongoing, so any aggressive behavior goes directly in the file. Tiffany, seeing the writing on the wall, tried to pull Dad away. But he shook her off, desperate. You're turning my son against me. Caleb belongs with his father, not with a brother who's never around. Where was all that fatherly concern? I asked him, my voice dangerously calm, when she threw Caleb out. What was your plan for a 10-year-old with nowhere to go in November? He sputtered, stammered. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. I was going to bring Caleb back in a few days. Those few days turned into 3 weeks, Dad. 3 weeks of you never checking on him, never calling. 3 weeks of pretending your son didn't exist. Tiffany finally managed to drag him out, their departure marked by his angry muttering about getting their own lawyer. But that wasn't the end. Tiffany started a smear campaign with Dad's relatives, twisting the story, claiming I was unstable from military service, that I stole the family home, that I was keeping Caleb from his devastated father. It worked on a few of them. Uncle Robert called me, yelling about family loyalty. Aunt Carol sent a text about forgiveness. So, I created my own group chat. Added Uncle Robert, Aunt Carol, everyone Tiffany had manipulated. And I started posting receipts. First, a photo of Caleb's converted room, his bed gone, replaced by Tiffany's filing cabinet. Then, Mrs. Albright's written statement about finding Caleb on her porch at 8:40 p.m. on a Tuesday in November with a trash bag. Then, screenshots of Dad lying about Caleb staying with friends because of behavioral issues. His actual words. His actual lies. And finally, the deed. Proof, irrefutable, that Dad never owned the house he'd lived in for 15 years. The chat went silent for an hour. I watched the read. Receipts pile up. Then, Uncle Robert. I had no idea. Tiffany called me crying. Made it sound like you were having a breakdown. I feel like an idiot. Aunt Carol. I feel sick. I believed her because she seemed so concerned. I even told others her version. I'm so embarrassed. My cousin asked how Dad could have let this happen if the man they knew had really changed so completely. One by one, the relatives who'd sided with Dad started backpedaling, offering apologies, asking what they could do to help. Tiffany tried to jump in, claiming manipulation, context. Uncle Robert shut her down, his text sharp. What context makes it okay to throw a 10-year-old out of his own house? She had no answer. The family chat turned into a pile-on. Relatives I barely knew spoke up, saying they always felt something was off with Tiffany, how Dad had changed. Someone asked about Caleb. I told them he was safe, and I was taking over his care permanently. Tiffany left the chat, destroyed, after 20 minutes of her attempts to regain control failing spectacularly. Dad never said a word. By the end of the day, I had 6 voicemails from relatives, apologizing, offering help. The CPS investigation continued. The caseworker, Paula, interviewed Caleb, assessed the home, saw the changes we'd already made. Caleb told her everything. Tiffany pushing him out. Dad's silence. That night on the porch. His fear of calling me his big brother. Paula interviewed Dad at his motel. He tried to minimize it, misunderstanding. Tiffany was stressed, planning to bring Caleb back. Paula wasn't buying it. 3 weeks of no contact, lies, a hostile home environment. Her recommendation, guardianship transferred to me permanently. Dad tried to block it, but his emergency motion was denied. The evidence was overwhelming. Around the same time, Veronica showed up at Caleb's school. I'd already given them her photo, explained the situation. The secretary recognized her immediately, stalled her, called me. I broke every speed limit getting there. I found her arguing with the principal, her voice rising, insisting she had every right to see her boyfriend's son. When she saw me walk in, her face went white. She tried to recover, a sickly sweet smile plastered on. Ethan, so worried about Caleb. David's worried too. You need to leave. Right now. My voice was a steel trap. She tried the calm, reasonable act again, for the benefit of the principal and any listening parents. Look, I made mistakes. I was stressed. But that doesn't mean I don't care about Caleb. You threw him out of his house. You told him he wasn't wanted. And now you show up at his school, acting concerned. The principal, several parents waiting in the office, the secretary, all watched in stunned silence. I made a mistake, she pleaded, a desperate, shrill edge to her voice. People make mistakes. Get out, I warned her, stepping closer, my posture communicating everything. If you come near him again, I'm filing for a restraining order. And I'll make sure every parent in this school knows exactly what you did to a 10-year-old boy. She looked at the principal for backup. Got none. The principal, without a word, reached for the phone, making it clear she was serious. Tiffany left, but not without loudly claiming I was keeping a father from his son, that she was just trying to help a troubled child. I filed that restraining order the next day. Tiffany and Dad's relationship crumbled. Mrs. Albright heard they were fighting constantly in their cramped motel room. Tiffany was looking for work for the first time in years. The put-together woman was coming apart at the seams. Her entire lifestyle depended on someone else's wallet, and that wallet was now empty. The eviction deadline hit. Dad hadn't moved a single thing. He thought I'd back down. 2 sheriff's deputies arrived at 9 a.m. Ben had arranged movers and a storage unit. Dad would have 60 days to claim his things. I'd taken Caleb to Mrs. Albright's, but he wanted to come back. I need to know it's really over, he said, his small voice firm. So I drove him back. We parked across the street, watching the movers take out the leather couch Tiffany bought, Dad's recliner, the master bed, all bound for a storage unit that would likely never be opened. Caleb just watched, silent, solemn, his hand in mine. Dad showed up around 10. Tiffany right behind him, in her SUV, looking disheveled. He looked older, like the weight of his choices was finally crushing him. He walked up to my car. We can still work this out, Ethan. Family's more important than legal documents. Caleb needs his father. Where was that 3 months ago, Dad? Why do you only care about being a father now that there are consequences? He had no answer. Tiffany got out of her car, maintaining her distance from Caleb, but close enough to talk. Ethan, you're being too emotional. David made mistakes. I made mistakes. But destroying your family over one bad night isn't the answer. One bad night. I stared her down, my voice rising. You spent months pushing a 10-year-old out of his own home. You told everyone in the family he was troubled and dangerous. That wasn't one bad night. That was a whole campaign. Something in her snapped. The deputies, the neighbors watching, the finality of it all. She started screaming about how unfair this was, how she'd given up everything for my father, how I was ruining her life over a kid who never liked her anyway, how she'd only tried to help. A deputy warned her, told her to calm down. She got louder, unhinged, listing her sacrifices, her expectations. Dad tried to quiet her, to pull her back from the edge. She shoved him hard, called him useless, said she'd wasted a year on him, that he'd promised her the house would be hers, that he'd lied about everything. That's when it all came out. Dad had told Tiffany the house was his. Said the trust was just a formality he could dissolve whenever he wanted. He'd been lying to her the entire time about what he actually owned. Tiffany stared at him with genuine hatred, a cold, predatory disgust. Called him a fraud, a coward, said she couldn't believe she'd wasted her time on someone so pathetic. Then she got in her SUV and drove off, leaving him standing in the driveway, surrounded by boxes, watching his relationship and his housing fall apart simultaneously. The deputies asked Dad if he had somewhere to go. He gave them a motel address. They offered to follow. He looked more broken than I'd ever seen him, a man completely defeated. He tried one last time. Is this really how you want things to end? Can you ever forgive me? You showed me who you are when things got hard, Dad. What did you expect? He just looked at me, hollow-eyed. He drove off. Caleb walked over slowly, looking up at me. Is Dad gone? For now.
Yeah.
For now. Is he ever coming back? I don't know, buddy. That depends on whether he can become the kind of father you deserve. Caleb nodded. Then he asked what we were having for dinner. Kids, they bounce back like that. They feel everything deeply, but they also know when it's time to move on, to find joy in the smallest things. Over the next few weeks, things settled into a new rhythm. Guardianship was finalized. The CPS case closed, deeming me a fit guardian. Caleb went back to his old school, adjusting well, making new friends. Mrs. Albright became like a grandmother, always there with a warm meal or a listening ear. Ben refused payment for his legal help, his reasoning simple. My mother would kill me if I charged for helping a kid who'd been wronged. I insist on buying him dinner, once a month. We even found Caleb's belongings at a donation center. Tiffany had dropped off 3 boxes. We bought it all back, for $40. Tiffany, I heard, moved in with her sister in another state, still looking for new opportunities. Dad stayed in a long-term motel, working, slowly putting his life back together. He reached out through Uncle Robert a few times, testing the waters, still not ready to truly apologize. About 8 months after the eviction, Dad finally called me. Said he'd been doing a lot of thinking, going to a real support group now. Said he understood why I'd done what I did. He wanted to be part of Caleb's life. I told him that was Caleb's call, not mine. Gave him Caleb's email. They started with letters. Caleb read the first one 3 times before responding. Asked me to read his draft. It was 1 paragraph. Why did you let Tiffany throw me out? Dad's answer was that he'd made a terrible mistake. So focused on his own grief, he forgot his son's. No excuse. Caleb wrote back that sorry wasn't enough yet, but maybe someday it would be. They've been talking since. Slow progress. Hard questions from Caleb, difficult answers from Dad. I don't know if they'll ever have a real relationship again. Trust is easier to break than rebuild. But I'm staying out of it. Caleb's old enough to make his own choices. My job is just to make sure he's safe while he figures it out. Our family isn't what it used to be. Not with Mom gone and Dad, well, Dad being who he turned out to be. But it's still family. Me and Caleb holding it together. Mrs. Albright next door, always there. Ben checking in. The house Mom left us is full of her now. Her pictures, her books, her flowers Caleb helps me tend. And 2 of her sons, looking out for each other the way she would have wanted. Mom used to say protecting the people you love sometimes means making hard calls, calls that hurt everyone. She said family isn't always about blood, it's about who actually shows up when things get hard. She was right, and I think she'd be proud. What do you guys think? If you were in my shoes, faced with your younger sibling being cast out by your own father, what would you have done? Have any of you had to make an impossible choice to protect someone you love? Tell me what you think. I really want to hear your perspective in the comments below.